Welcome, everyone, to our last Easy Earth Talks of the semester. We're going to hear from David Himes on creating impact, faculty engagement, and community-based research and learning. David is the Sustainable Communities Manager from the Franco Harris Pittsburgh Center and Penn State Outreach. David Himes coordinates and guides the implementation of educational demonstration projects, provides training for local green stormwater infrastructure certification, and supports engaged scholarship and community engagement in sustainable neighborhood placemaking. He received his Bachelor of Landscape Architecture degree from Penn State and is a registered landscape architect.
Thank you, Virginia. Good evening, everyone. Afternoon, morning, depending on where you are spatially or in time watching this. As Virginia mentioned, I'm David Himes. I'm the Sustainable Communities Manager at the Franco Harris Pittsburgh Center at Penn State, which is part of Outreach. And today, I just want to talk a little bit about faculty engagement and community-based research and learning design. It will be a little bit light. We will start off talking a little bit more about what is Outreach? What do we do? What are some of our services? So you can hopefully get connected to us if you need help with some of the work you all are doing. Rehash collective and broader impacts, such as what Dr. Susan Reno had talked about a couple months ago. Give a couple examples of faculty research that have occurred in Pittsburgh, as well as some of the student experiential learning, and then kind of wrap up, give some time for some Q&A from there. So the Franco Harris Pittsburgh Center, we exist. We're in downtown Pittsburgh. We've been at the Energy Innovation Center in the Lower Hill District since 2015, and the Penn State Center has had a presence in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County since 2008. So we've been around for a while. Has anyone actually heard of us? I know a couple folks, but maybe not. Yeah. So we like to get in front of you all because we find ourselves as being an asset that's rooted into the community that can help connect you to the resources that you need for the types of research, programs, and student experiential learning that you seek out in the work that you do. So here's the Energy Innovation Center. It's an old trade school. It's built in 1928. It's LEED Platinum, so pretty cool facility. If you want to come to Pittsburgh, if you're around, get in touch with us. We can give you a quick tour and show you around. But our mission really is about fostering community growth through education with student success, workforce development, non-credit programming, such as the Stormwater NGICP program, and working toward equitable opportunities and finding ways of engaging folks that may have been historically left behind and creating opportunities for them to access the resources and the expertise of the university where they are in their communities. We're a small team, or ragtag bunch. Tom is AICP, which is a certified planner, if you're not familiar. Juliana helps us out in the background, and I am a landscape architect. So we do have a lot of technical knowledge around design, land development, planning, resilient spaces, but we're happy to engage in any way possible. I was telling Virginia earlier, Pittsburgh is a great city as far as being relatively small. It's super accessible. So anyone that we don't know, we're going to know someone that knows them. We're about 2 degrees of separation away from the resources that you're probably seeking out. So outreach programs, you can hop on there and see the breadth and width of it. I just wanted to point 2 things out. The Franco Harris Pittsburgh Center, we also house the Readiness Institute at Penn State. It's a high school program that engages in career preparedness, post-high school programming for students, as well as our urban counterpart in Philadelphia. So the Penn State Center Philadelphia also exists if you're looking for opportunities in that section of the state. So we're probably all familiar with this type of map. Our campuses across the Commonwealth. This is from New Ken's website, which is why that shield's in that southwest corner. But this landscape's changing. What are the neighborhoods and what are the communities we have access and institutions in over time has developed? And so this made sense maybe a while ago. Obviously, that's in flux right now. But if you're not aware, Outreach has developed this community impact map, which is a resource for anyone at Penn State to pin and plug in the different types of programs, research, projects that they're working on, so that others within the institution have access to finding spatially where these are occurring. You can also filter out by type of activity, virtual, in-person, et cetera. So here in Pittsburgh, you see the 3 rivers. A lot of these pins are things like Allegheny Extension education programs. We have some of the different programs that the Penn State Center works in. What's highlighted down here, Dr. Robert Loeb is a forester out of Penn State Du Bois, And we helped him identify some different forest ecosystems for his research, which was interested in legacy pollution in soil and how that could help facilitate hardwood forest regeneration. So certainly I know a little bit about biodiversity and ecosystems. We also have connections and relationships with city forestry, with a nonprofit called Tree Pittsburgh. So we're able to quickly assess and identify where the potential project locations are that satisfied the types of site characteristics for his research. And there were even little things, if you look at a map, Pittsburgh can be kind of difficult to really get a feel for just by looking at from an aerial. So while it's easy to look and find large patches of forest, there's little details like knowing Riverview Park has crazy snakeworms, an invasive that degrades organic content and creates a variable that Dr. Loeb didn't really want to have to control for. So we can easily start to identify good and bad sites pretty quickly. Within outreach, we're also working on Keystone Collective Impact. So one of our key tenets is thinking about student success, but also how do we make strong connections and outcomes with our land grant obligation as a university. So if you're not familiar, collective impact trademark came out of Thrive Together in the late aughts. Then there's a white paper in 2011 that identified these main 5 pillars of how to develop collective impact model of engaging with communities for research that had meaningful outcomes, transformational outcomes. So some of them we'll touch on is like common agenda, making sure that you're speaking with the folks that live in that space and understanding that you're all on the same page, looking for the same outcomes that have support research outcomes, but also support community change. And then at the end there's continuous communication and strong backbone. And I think these are 2 things that we're gonna kind of come back to as being really important. It's that ongoing relationship building and showing up that's gonna build trust and give you access to the resources and the community groups and the folks, the neighborhood, that will really help you develop stronger outcomes with your research and your student work. Yeah.
Can you go back one slide? Yeah. So Keystone Collective Impact, is that a program? Is it a best practices framework? Just like, what is it?
So it's going to be, as far as I understand, a best practices framework for how outreach can help to break down silos across our university. And so thinking about some of these things on the right column, what are ways that we can facilitate connections between colleges and other departments that help to share those resources, connections, and prevent the competition that we sometimes have unintentionally just because we're kind of in our own space and sphere. So it's built upon the collective impact TM, but it's going to have a little bit slight different twist to it that's applied more specifically to Penn State's needs and strategic goals.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah. So, and to follow up with that, one of the reasons I'm showing the collective impact model then is there are going to be slight differences. This particular set are revisions that were developed in 2015 by the Collective Impact Forum. And I think it's important to understand that they're revising this as time goes. And one of their most recent revisions in 2022 was actually thinking more specifically about equity, a term that we may or may not be allowed to use anymore. But I think it's important to know that there are criticisms of this model, and they're trying to develop it in a way that's providing growth and a stronger relationship with community and outcomes. And a couple of the important points in these 5 sets, community ownership, this idea that whenever you're setting the agenda, talking to community and developing what the research goals and outcomes are, it should be driven by what the community's voice says. And there's a little bit of cart and horse here where how do you develop research interest? How do you meet community interest? And I think it all comes back to just showing up and having the communication early and often. And I'll reinforce that in a minute. Strategies that fit the local context. This is particularly important to Pittsburgh because there's a lot of geographic barriers that mean that the 90 neighborhoods in the city of Pittsburgh have very strong identities. A lot of people don't want to cross a bridge or a river to go to the other place. They have identity to their neighborhood. Furthermore, Allegheny County itself has 130 different distinct municipalities. It's one of the most divided counties in the nation. So there's a lot of governance to work through, and trying to figure out what is the strategy that fits their specific local context is important. And then those last two, again, impact and belief in civic parables is something that I think we really need to work better on, particularly myself. I think this hasn't been captured very well, even in this presentation, where we're trying to document the narrative and the story that's coming out of the community engagement piece so that we can tell the stories and exemplify our successes. And really, it's about kind of generating energy and acknowledging when folks put their time into the efforts that we're asking them to do, that there's meaning to it, that there's a difference, and that they can affect change in their communities. But that takes a lot of work. So systems change takes implementation at multiple scales and in multiple sectors. And what I think is particularly interesting is that when Susan Reno presented, she had 10, sorry, it's a little contrasty, but 10 different broader impacts. On NSF's website right now, there's 9, and the one that's missing is policy change. And I don't know that we'll see a ton of that in KCI, to be determined. But if we're to implement meaningful research and community service through our land grant impact, it has to be thinking about how do we affect the system? How do we change the system in a way that we're breaking down barriers for folks? And if you haven't watched, I'm guessing everyone here probably participated in Susan Reno's, but for anyone that's watching, if you haven't watched her recording, I encourage it. They have some great resources at ARIS about thinking about integrating broader impacts into research proposals. So the first project I'll talk about, a little bit about is this active living research. It's hosted by Melissa Bopp, who's a kinesiologist, as well as Malika Bose out of Landscape Architecture. And when I say you need to be there early and often, and it takes time, Melissa came to us in 2017 with a potential project. And the idea was pretty loose. It really tied back to this active living research, which is its own institution with its own kind of goals and priorities. And we thought, okay, this makes sense. We can see where this connects with community, where they are and what the issues they have, but how do we potentially tweak a little bit of the approach that it's maybe solving the specific issues that they're experiencing where they are? So when they first came to us, again, they looked at a map and they said, we have these goals, we know where environmental justice communities are, and we can do some street view walking and get an idea of it. But they had chosen Uptown and Larimer as 2 potential candidate neighborhoods. Uptown is unique in that it has a lot of prospective ownership. It's also being slated for, or it's currently under the bus rapid transit development. So if you're thinking about what are the infrastructural barriers to people, that's sort of all getting blown up anyway. So we could kind of cross that off right away and say, let's focus on some other things. East Liberty has had a lot of investment, capital investment, and Larimer has the Choice Neighborhoods grant dating back a little while, but a $30 million housing and urban development grant funding into it. So we kind of ended up pushing towards Homewood, which is the purple section on the east. And there are some things that you have to be really cognizant about when approaching these communities, particularly places like Homewood or the Hilltop or Hazelwood. There are still other universities in Pittsburgh, and a lot of people are interested in working environmental justice and economically distressed communities. So sometimes they get kind of research to death. They get research fatigue. So how do we approach them and make sure that we can build trust and make sure that what we're proposing has value to them? So through discussion, let me hop back. So through discussion, what we tried to do is really connect them to a lot of the key community partners. So we found 15 community organizers to have in-depth conversations about what the issues were. So this was governance, planning, transit, health, social services, and a number of other of these organizations that really can paint the picture for what has been happening, but what needs to happen next to help improve the environment that people live in. One of those organizations is Operation Better Block, which is a community development corporation in Homewood. They also run a program called Junior Green Corps, which we help fund through the Learn and Earn program, where basically high schoolers are able to get paid for summer education rather than picking up a simple job. We use the youth as researchers to then do site audits and assessments of the environments or the conditions of the built environment around them, and then also had them do site surveys. So working with their neighbors and people that they know to collect data for the research. Now, there were some caveats. High schoolers sometimes don't maybe have as much engagement. So trying to reinforce and emphasize the value of the work that they're doing is going to be incredibly important if you're relying on high school students, especially if they're unattended at any period. So some of the data was garbage and had to be redone. But all in all, there was an educational component for local youth, an opportunity to get paid, and a way to collect more data than what a few people on the ground could do by engaging with 17 youth, local youth. This all culminated then in creating some impact in the community. So this report was able to be then handed off to Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. So they had 2 reports on the street audits and the park audits. And DOMI looked at the street conditions and utilized the preferential order to actually implement some investments into infrastructure rehabilitation. And to touch back on what is the value, what are people getting out of it? That can be tricky. Sometimes it's just offering a gift card, could be cash. It could be just giving them a meal. Recognizing what are the barriers to each of these individuals to come and participate in your focus groups or in your community meetings or in your open house. Pittsburgh Pittsburgh Regional Transit isn't the most effective public transit system. It leaves a little bit to desired. So while you might be asking them to show up for an hour and a half, they might have to spend another hour just to show up. What are the barriers? Can you provide childcare? Could you provide food? Can you provide a stipend for them to get there? Could you even provide transit, such as Uber or Lyft, or what we colloquially call jitneys, just the illegal taxi services. All right, so another program research to talk about is the NSF Civic, leveraging existing fiber optic cables, PI, Tianjin, and Zhen. So this project in particular, I think, really emphasizes, again, getting in early and talking about the programs early, but thinking about flexibility in the design for how you engage with community. So we could do a bunch of geospatial analysis. This is easy for me to do because I have that background and I can take my understanding of where the data is. So 311 calls as well as PWSA information, and overlay it with the telecom information to get proposed routes. One of the main issues with this project, though, is that the telecom company was super tight-lipped about where infrastructure was for proprietary reasons. And until we had an NDA signed, and even once we got it signed, they wouldn't really give us information. We had to ask the right questions. We didn't know all the right questions to ask. So we had a route proposed. So this was the final route that we proposed. However, the number of splices required in downtown Pittsburgh, because it's almost a 3-decade-old fiber optic system, was significant. The quality of the splices was poor, and all the investments into infrastructure meant that a lot of roads were getting torn up and the cable kept breaking. So we had to make some rapid changes to where we actually were running the route and essentially cut it short, which meant that some of the communities that we had been talking to weren't actually along the fiber optic route and no longer really wanted to participate because they didn't understand that it could still be beneficial data to understand where in their communities they're experiencing landslides, sinkholes, and localized flooding. Should also emphasize the getting in early. So in this case, T1 had reached out in late 21, and we used a good period of time through early 22 to have conversations about how he was doing work on University Park that really focused in on soil saturation and sinkholes. We realized that's important to Pittsburgh, but there's some other conditions that they want to explore as well. So we created opportunities with the city environmental planners, Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, to then figure out what tools do they have in their arsenal for identifying these conditions, and what are the additional geohazards that they have, so we can start to apply that, and then start to try and have conversations with community development corporations to figure out what are the conditions and concerns of people in the neighborhoods where they live. As I mentioned, the fiber optic route kind of had to change a lot. And so these conversations I had really early on with community development corporations, really just touching base and not even trying to oversell, just giving them a heads up and saying, We are interested in doing this type of research. If it ends up being in your community, are you interested? And that way, when we do identify which areas this fiber optic's going in, we can come to them and set up the community meetings without them being, surprised. But making sure you're not overselling it either. Undersell, overdeliver. But ultimately, we weren't really able to have those community conversations. So we worked with the city, and we have the Engage Pittsburgh website, which provided a description of the project, contact information, and an applet where folks could actually pin on the map and provide some comment and feedback about where they're experiencing and what types of problems. It wasn't as robust as we would have liked to see, especially because the Engage Pittsburgh website was so brand new. So lessons learned. Getting in early is really important, and we had those early conversations with community development corporations, so they were on board and they were aware of it. But with the constant change in the telecommunications and some of the infrastructure that we were kind of beholden to with the type of research that was occurring, we had to pivot, and we didn't necessarily bake in the type of flexibility that would have benefited us in those types of moments of change. This is going to be just a quick pitch, the High Performance Building Summer Program. This is going on its 4th year. We usually have about 12 students each year. It's 3 weeks in Pittsburgh, focusing on Passive House LEED, Living Building Challenge, and it's a partnership with Global Building Network, ARC-E, and Southwest College out of Northern Ireland. So they bring a cohort of students and faculty over. So it's an opportunity for students to rub elbows with international students and get exposure to high performance building. So if you know anyone that's interested, they have a few more days, and there are scholarships available to defray costs. City Semester Program. This has been going on since 2017, and it's an immersive experience in Pittsburgh. So thinking about experiential learning, this class really tries to focus on what are the opportunities for students to get the most out of their time while they're in Pittsburgh. And we have kind of 2 approaches to that. One is the Earth 412 Urban Sustainability course, where each week they focus on a different facet of urban sustainability, and we bring a local practitioner into the class, and they talk about that particular topic and how they apply urban sustainability to their job. And then we also partner students with a community partner internship. And this is kind of a rigorous process because we have students create an application, but we also have the community partners create an application to identify what their needs and what the work schedule looks like. And then we might make little tweaks to kind of both ends and then find the right partnership, which is nice because what happens is students might have an opportunity that they wouldn't think that they would apply to originally. It kind of puts them out in a position where they can get something unexpected out of it. We've had multiple students come out of this program saying, like, I didn't realize working for a nonprofit's a viable future for me. But just being given that opportunity to work in community and work alongside folks, they get a different experience and understanding of what is out there. So while it takes a decent amount of time, this is value added to our community partners. We're taking the weight of marketing and vetting all the interns and creating that placement. So this helps provide value to them. So when we come back and ask them to present or meet with faculty and discuss ideas, we're trying to create those opportunities to share resources back and forth and really create goodwill across different organizations in the community. The Franco-Harris website has all the student spotlights. So each year each student creates a final video. So if you want to see what some of their work experience, internship experience, and summer experiences look like, you can check out the videos on our website as well. And then the longest running student engaged program at the Pittsburgh Center has been a relationship with Penn State Landscape Architecture. So Ken originally brought students down in 2008. We worked with Ken up until 2022, and then he retired. And then this spring, we're working with Sarah Hadavi out of Landscape Architecture. So 14 semesters, 170 students in 23 communities, all across mostly neighborhoods in the city, but some boroughs outside. And this class really, again, is about having us in the community and developing those relationships and really telling the story of how these students worked with community to be able to engage with them and be the artists for their vision. And through that, we've been able to find opportunities where we're getting invited into space and providing the service or this educational opportunity that goes both ways between the students and the community members. Again, setting expectations, really important. We emphasize that whenever these students are done, the product that they produce probably is not going to be built. They're conceptual, but they're creating wonderful ideas that can be a toolbox for those folks whenever they get money, or they can use it for grant finding. But we also hope that it's educational, where it elevates their ability to talk about design and planning in a way that they didn't know before. And that's been important in particularly two cases I'll mention. So right now, the city of Pittsburgh's undergoing its first ever comprehensive plan. They kicked it off in December. So giving the hilltop neighborhoods the chance to work with landscape architects and designers and learn the vernacular and the process of how to design and start to get the gears spinning on what could be in their neighborhood gives them the leg up whenever the professional consultants come and start to do their work for the comprehensive plan. It can give them the advantage of having the ability and the knowledge to communicate effectively. And that's been seen and proven true coming back to that Larimer Choice Neighborhoods grant. Ken's class had been in Larimer before that. And they discussed different opportunities for open space, the value of stormwater and green stormwater infrastructure, and some of the resilient design planning that they saw as being an important fixture of their neighborhood moving forward. So when a really high stakes investment for affordable housing came in, and they started looking for sites to actually put housing on, they just kind of pumped the brakes on a little bit and just said, we've talked about this, in these locations we want to maintain as open space. So they found different locations to put in housing and integrated the stormwater management and the green open space in a way that reflected what the community valued. And part of that really was a conversation that happened years before through the Pittsburgh studio. So here's in the blue outline is the city limits. In green are all the different locations we've worked in. So a lot of different types of neighborhoods with different needs and challenges, some different boroughs, but all of them, I think, get something out of it as far as being able to generate ideas. The students get the opportunity to work with neighborhoods and work in real space rather than sitting in University Park the whole time and just kind of speculating and not necessarily having a client. And that's what we think is so valuable about the Pittsburgh studio, is giving the students the opportunity to actually speak with people and get pushback, get resistance that isn't just their professor, isn't some visiting critic, but it's just a community member, a client that they can actually answer to say, these are the design decisions I made, and try and justify them or rework it and try and figure out a new solution. So if anyone happens to be in Pittsburgh again, coming up on this Thursday, we're actually having the open house in the Hilltop. So the 15 students in this semester's class will present their plans and their final project designs. And just some key takeaways. So really it's about showing up and being present. And I don't expect you all to always be there. And that's sort of what these other organizations and units are for, like the Franco Harris Centers. We want to create those connections and be liaisons. But we need you to also show up early to give us the ideas. Just touch base with the Pittsburgh or Philadelphia Center or one of the other units and just let them know what you're doing and what you might have an interest in. That way, whenever we're just talking to different community groups, we can just be like, oh yeah, Virginia's moving into HHT potentially, and maybe I shouldn't say that. And, and there could be these opportunities for relationships and really building those conversations early so we can start to flesh them out. Listening and trusting others. Community members aren't necessarily going to get a lot of the technical perspectives that you all are working on, but they have real issues and real ideas for the places that they live in. And so how do we kind of bridge those two? Being flexible, again, not trying to put the cart before the horse, but we need to figure out how do we engage from both ends of research design and community-based solutions to come to something that works for both parties, and being adaptable in a way when things just don't go the way you want it to, especially considering that a student semester or a grant being 6-12 months isn't really on the timeline of community-driven change in the speed of government. Develop community, we need each other. I don't know what is in the future for environmental justice, community impacts, and community-based research design with the current administration, but I don't think it's going to be gone forever if it does disappear. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to really think about, if you're not comfortable with community engagement, start to practice, because there's maybe less pressure to do it quite right now. And ultimately, we kind of need each other right now anyway. So develop that community. And I'll add one last one, is that if you have the opportunity in your budget, consider hiring or dedicating one person as a project manager. Understand what your strengths, weaknesses, and your capacity are, because we're asking community members to essentially be part of a project team, and we all have different ways of communicating, and we all have different strengths. I know one NSF grant officer who said the best projects, the best results that she sees, there's always a defined, dedicated project manager, because the PI can't do everything. So whether that's trying to work with someone in the community or hiring someone else or someone on campus, just consider what your time and availability is, because we need to be transparent, open communicators, and have strong project timelines to make sure that we maintain the trust and the communication both ways between our community organizations. Thank you. Certainly can take questions, or if you want to email me, I can give more resources on collective impact. And we really hope that you guys reach out at some point and start conversations with how your research or how your coursework with your students might engage with Pittsburgh community.
Okay, so one question from Laura Fowler is, first of all, she said, David, thanks for this presentation. As you are doing this community engaged work, what advice might you give to someone wanting to start on this kind of work?
From the faculty perspective, or from my perspective, like if you were to try to be,
I'd say faculty.
Yeah, so if it's for faculty and thinking about research, design, and community-based experiential learning for students, the biggest thing is going to be just making those contacts early. Rely on when I say it gets confusing, but in this case, rely on your Penn State community and rely on your networks. And if you can get out and introduce yourself and expand those networks as robustly as possible, then it just helps us having conversation with local folks and being able to start to connect the dots with how we can kind of break down the vertical integration of the university, break down those silos, and create hopefully opportunities not only for you, but for the community members to engage with those resources in ways that they just don't have the connection to do so.
Thank you, David, for the wonderful talk. I'm curious about the process of researchers working with the Franco Center. Is this something where they need to build it into their budget? So like you're having discussions as part of the grant budgeting process? Because you've mentioned several times starting the relationship building early, but what about the funding and that special piece that everyone has to deal with?
That's a great question. And I think it always comes back to, what are you asking for people to do, and acknowledging their time, their expertise, and their knowledge. And that doesn't just go for the Franco Harris Center. That goes for just community organizations and neighbors showing up too. So talking about like providing dinner or stipend, whatever else it might be. So with the Franco Harris Center in general, we're happy to have those initial conversations and develop what we think could be useful networks, relationships, or providing the resources for work that has already been done, so you can familiarize yourself with the history of that topic within Pittsburgh, and that way you're ready to go whenever you meet with key stakeholders. If there's a longer ongoing engagement and relationship, whether we're written in as part of the grant or providing some sort of fee for service, that's always appreciated, because we only have so much time in a day and we need to justify some of that time. But I think that goes all across the board. So it doesn't matter who you're asking. If it's more than a few meetings and you're starting to have them engage more at a regular basis, think of ways that you can find opportunities to fund those community partners, fund those neighbors for showing up when you need them.
Thanks. It was really great to hear more about the Franco Harris Center and the projects you've been doing. One question I always have is, like, as somebody who's interested in has had a little bit of experience doing community research, but interested in doing more and like really making it more central to my work, is like, for a group like yours, like, how do you balance, the long-term relationships that you're building with communities? Like you referenced a few times, like you're hearing kind of what are the top needs of the communities, but then you have researchers like us who come with like our own research agendas and interests and questions. Like, where would you sit on that balance between like, do you have a list of kind of like almost questions banked from community members? Like, it would be great if a researcher came in and looked at this issue versus somebody coming in and being like, I want to look at this issue. Like, where are the community spots where I can work? Like, how do you balance those kind of two ends of the spectrum?
I guess we should make a database. That's a great idea. No, I think we're just have embedded in our communities. You know, we sit on boards and we sit in communities and we participate. So we're constantly having those conversations and understanding things. So I might have a really good idea of what's happening on the Allegheny, whereas Tom might have a good idea on the Ohio. And there are some blank spots, but we have those relationships with people to keep track of them. But I think to your point, one of the hardest things is that ongoing relationship. And that's where KCI has the potential to help create the model, is it really does underscore a backbone organization. And whether that's outreach or kind of someone else is probably to be determined depending on the actual project. But having someone that's there to provide more longevity than what a single individual faculty member might be able to provide. And then there's that connection with then maybe the unit or the department. So even if one faculty cycles out, there's opportunities to bring new faculty in, just like hopefully we did with landscape architecture. Yeah, does that answer that? Okay.
Thanks, David. I think about this work with a transdisciplinary lens. You didn't use that jargony word, which is great, but the idea of co-designing research, and there are a lot of us who are thinking about how to do that better, how to develop trainings on this and develop better research proposals. And I've been working a little bit with Kristen Gosling at Penn State, Pittsburgh as well. I know SSRI has a number of activities as well, really around how do you train the next set of research, the next research agenda around transdisciplinary research. Like, how do you co-design together? And a lot of the elements that you listed here. I'm curious if you're thinking that way of like, how can we partner with other units across Penn State to develop a more comprehensive understanding of how we do this kind of work better? Does that make sense?
It does. And I don't have the right answer. So I think we are thinking about how do we create better, particularly from I think the experiential learning, the student outcomes, student success is thinking about what are the connections across departments as far as how do we share resources for successes and failures for this standpoint. I don't know that we have a system yet, but I think that's again where I'll just throw his name out there. I hope he forgives me. Jameson Malcolm is really directing the KCI initiative. So if you want to get into, I know KCI at psu.edu is one
KCI is
contact.
again Keystone. What is
Keystone Collective Impact.
Collective
Yeah,
Impact.
yeah. So that is all being developed in a way that's trying to think about what are the mechanisms to make that happen, and what the actual solution is. I don't know yet.
Okay, thank you.
We can keep you posted.
I'll go bug him, I guess. Other questions?
I was trying to think of a way to word it correctly. And it's kind of piggybacking off of what Erica mentioned, but I guess more from like a research perspective. Like, one of the things I'm interested in is around the world, we have like all these kind of interventions, right? Like, there's these programs for community development, and often the impact evaluation is done project by project. And it just struck me, like, through your examples, that you guys sit at a position where you're working with so many different people on campus on different research ideas, or potentially like, you know, community support or interventions. Like, have you guys looked at like kind of what synergies there might be between, you know, research being done by different departments, or like what's like the cumulative impact of having multiple like landscape planning processes, and, you know, Tia June's like project on sensing geohazards? Like, how do you get like a sense of the collective impact of the research that's being done?
Oh boy. I think we need to grow as a unit to be able to absorb capacity, just to maybe think more critically about those strategies to a certain extent, and something that we're maybe aware of. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. I apologize.
No, something that I've been looking into literature on, but like, how do you, like programs that are designed by different people with different objectives, but are kind of hitting the same communities. Like, they're, like you mentioned, like some communities are getting, you know, studied to death almost. So like, what is the cumulative impact of all that? But it just struck me that even though you have very limited staff and you guys seem to really punch above your weight, like, you're kind of in this interesting nexus of a lot of different projects going on.
Yeah, I think establishing like robust interconnection of different projects starts to get a little bit burdensome, but I think what we try to do is remember we don't always have to like execute a project. It can just be making introductions, right? And that's, I think, just having these conversations and getting to know people. So there have been connections like with AI for the social good, or folks with like the atmospheric and studies where we're thinking about air quality in Pittsburgh, and we're able to start reconnecting those researchers so that then there's actually a cohort of people talking about the same programs and trying to align what they're doing so they're not over competing with each other, and that the outcomes are a bit synergistic or at least co-productive.
It almost sounds like maybe we should be doing some of that here at University Park, getting more of our different researchers, our different departments, our different colleges talking here so that it takes some of the burden off of you guys of having to connect back. Like, oh, hey, do you know this other group's also looking at these same questions? Food for thought on how we can do that more in-house on this campus so that more collaboration can move forward.
Yeah, I don't want to say it isn't happening. There are folks here, right, that care about this type of conversation, and there's plenty of others that just aren't here for various reasons. And so, yeah, it's happening. Maybe it just takes time, right? And it can't happen overnight. So it'll grow, and I think we'll get there. And as long as we're moving forward into a better, more productive space, then that's good.
I'm going to try to ask two. So the first one, just sorry for my ignorance, but can you say more about outside of the Pittsburgh Center, what outreach does and how it relates to extension? And then a second question, I'm still kind of hung up on this collective impact thing. And the reason is because there's a huge and old research literature on the challenges and best practices for community-driven research, community-engaged research, co-production, and 30 other overlapping terms. So like why the heck is it trademarked? And why is the institution elevating this one framework so highly?
So, all right, I should say Collective Impact Forum is the trademark. And I was just using that as more of a way to try and distinguish between what they're doing and what Outreach and Keystone Collective Impact is interested in doing, which it's frameworked off of Collective Impact model, which comes from roughly 2011, and it's been in development for the last year or so. And you're right, there's plenty of other models. Each have their pluses and minuses. And I think that some of the strategic planners within Outreach just identified that this has the components that seem to make sense if we kind of tweak it a little bit to meet the structure of what a Penn State institution looks like. I can't say exactly why they're like, this is definitely it, other than it seems to meet the needs and suggests to find the strategies for overcoming some of those barriers and challenges with long-term community engagement and meaningful community impact through research. Outreach and extension. Can I just talk to you a little bit afterward?
Sure.
Yeah.
And the trademark?
That's what I was saying is collective impact model. That's more of like the trademark that came out of the Thrive Together. I think that's what it's called. Strive Together. Yeah, I probably got that wrong. Program that was in like 2006 to 2009. So they developed the collective impact model. So that's why we're using the term Keystone Collective Impact as a different kind of title to the work. Oh, thanks you all. Hope you have a great evening. I'll stick around if you have any more questions.